Hi, thanks for joining me today. This tutorial is coming from Create to Donate, and I'm going to show you how to make t-shirt yarn out of a t-shirt. This may be a t-shirt that you've had around the house, or it may be something that you bought at a big box store on clearance. You just want it to be 100% cotton, and you also preferably want it to have no seams on the sides. I'll show you more about that as we're getting through the tutorial. Right now I want to talk about the materials that we need. You'll need a self-healing mat, a long ruler, a rotary cutter, and a 100% cotton t-shirt. To get started, you're going to want to unfold your t-shirt, and then because I have such a big t-shirt, I folded it in half again to make cutting it easier. The first thing I need to do is get rid of the armpits and the top body, as well as the neckline, because it's sewn differently and it won't allow me to have a continuous thread when I am starting to cut my yarn. So I'm going to take my ruler and my rotary cutter. I'm going to go to the tip of the armpit, which you always can see at the end there. There's a little bit of a seam. And I'm going to line it up on my mat with a straight line. And I'm going to use my rotary cutter and I'm going to cut right through that. Now I'm going to start cutting the fabric piece that we've prepared. In order to keep a continuous strand of thread or yarn that we're going to pull once we're done cutting, I need to keep about 1 inch that is uncut. I'm not going to cut all the way through as I'm using my ruler and my rotary cutter. Instead, I'm going to leave this inch open. I typically use my rulers on my self-healing mat as my guides so that I remember where the inch is. For the bulk of my projects, I like to use yarn at about 1.5 inches. There are some projects that might need it to be smaller, but usually those are knitted together. A lot of people are using t-shirt ties for fabric masks right now, so 1.5 inches is really important because the t-shirt is going to be washed and dried and pulled in order to make the ties over time, and so you want it to be a little bit stronger than just the 3/4 inch or the 1 inch yarn. So I'm going to cut this at 1.5 increments. You can see that I've already gotten started, and what I basically do is go down the line with my ruler. So I've gotten to the end of my t-shirt, and as with most t-shirts, there's a serged edge that finished the fabric that I'm not going to be able to use for these purposes, so I'm just going to trim that right off. Now I get to open up all of the different cuts that I've made in order to start creating my continuous strand. So I've pulled apart all of the cutting that I've done. As you can see, there's now this middle piece. It almost looks like a centipede if you're thinking about it. There's this middle piece that's still uncut. And so I make sure all of the strands are open and not stuck together. And then I start at one end and I lay it out. So I've laid out my t-shirt piece, and I tend to do it so that I do it one strand at a time. I put all of the other pieces to the side. I'm right-handed, so I put it to the right side because I'll be working from left to right. And I put everything else to the right side so I can focus on the angle that I'm cutting here, because you do need to pay close attention to where you cut it. So this is one of the steps that when I first started doing this tended to trip me up a little bit. You don't want to cut in a straight line again, right? We want to be able to get the angle so that the strand stays continuous throughout the whole piece that we're making. In this case, the marks that I made are actually going to help us because it shows me where the tip of the yarn should start and the angle at which I should be cutting in order to start the strand. So now I'm going to cut it at the angle. As you can see, I've already cut it. I didn't want to get in the way of you being able to see the angle. I'm going to take my rotary cutter and I'm going to cut it at an angle like this, as opposed to straight on like this. And then it gives me the tip of my starting strand. What I like to do when I'm doing yarn to make sure I'm going in the right direction as a double check is to actually start pulling it so that it gives me the direction that I need to go in as I'm cutting. You can see I've already started to make the yarn, and because I've done that, it's now going to show me where the angle is where I keep cutting. So it gives me some good direction if I'm new to this or if I'm just having one of those days where I need to make sure that I'm double checking my work. I'm going to take my rotary cutter again, and I'm going to make sure that this point here meets the top point up there, and now I've continued my strand. And I just keep cutting in that fashion to create the yarn. I finished off camera cutting the rest of the yarn so you didn't have to watch each of the cuts. You understand that you need to cut it at an angle, not straight on, and then you'll get a mess of the t-shirt that you now need to create into the yarn. And that is by pulling it. That is by pulling it taut. And you'll also see some weaknesses along the way possibly that might break that you would trim up. So now I've gotten to the end of the line, literally, and all I need to do is ball this up so that I can use it in future uses. So I'm just gonna take my hand and I'm gonna ball it up like I would yarn, typically, or even embroidery floss or any of those things. I'm gonna create a ball and keep winding until I'm done. And then I'll have a nice ball of yarn to use for my projects.